So here I was, 14 years old, completely unknowing, and sat our mother down on a couch much like this on a cold October night. And that's when my mom spoke the words I don't believe any parent should ever have to say. She said, "Missy, your biological mother had an abortion during her pregnancy with you, and you survived it."
Wow.
Wow.
What a miracle.
A miracle.
You are a miracle.
It was so horrific, as you can probably imagine. You know, a lot of people ask me, you know, but didn't you ever feel different growing up? I grew up knowing that I was born prematurely, that I had a lot of health issues. Back then, we didn't talk about circumstances like mine. We didn't hear about it in the news. And so, you know, that kind of news was absolutely devastating. I didn't do well with that, I'll admit. You know, I knew in that moment of time, God alone spared my life. And I knew He had a purpose for me to come forward and someday share His story with the world, but I struggled so much. I didn't want to be this girl years ago. I think many of us can relate to what that's like to be that age, right? You just want to be like everyone else. And it was a very lonely place to be. So I developed an eating disorder, trying to control something in my life when I couldn't control that. I struggled with alcohol abuse. I made so many poor decisions that flew in the face of how I was raised. And just to distance myself really from my pain and suffering. And I think so many people can relate to what that's like.
Absolutely. I know I struggled with alcoholism, and I know a lot of women and men who use alcohol and drugs to try to self-medicate, to stop the pain. And it doesn't work. That's, thank God for recovery, but thank God, I mean, you're such a survivor in so many areas. It's just amazing. I mean.
Right.
Do you know the details of the abortion, or do you tell that?
I do. So my parents knew that I had survived what's called a saline infusion abortion. And so that's not a procedure performed routinely anymore, but it was back in the 1970s, it was the most common. That type of procedure involved injecting a toxic salt solution into the amniotic fluid surrounding me in the womb. And the intent of that toxic salt solution was to actually poison and scald me to death. So usually the child would soak in that toxic salt solution for about 3 days. They would induce labor with the intent of that deceased child then being expelled from the womb. We actually know through my medical records now that I didn't soak in it for just 3 days. I actually soaked in it for 5. Even 2 days longer than what they intended by the standards of that procedure, just quite simply because they couldn't induce my birth mother's labor successfully. It just was not happening.
How far along was she?
That's such an interesting question. So my mom and dad were initially told that she was about 5 months along with me. And that's actually what the abortionist had written in my medical records, that it was about 18 to 20 weeks in the pregnancy. But the fact that I was able to survive, and I weighed almost 3 pounds, I weighed 2 pounds, 14 ounces, that led the doctors to believe that she was much further along in her pregnancy. And so in my medical records, a neonatologist actually remarked I looked like I was probably about 31 weeks.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Like what you saw? Make sure to comment and like below. Hit that subscribe button for more content uploaded weekly.